Hello everyone, my name is David Luchford and welcome to lesson 41 of my Ancient Greek course. In today's lesson, we are going to be learning about contract adjectives. But before we do that, I would like to tell you that it is a new year and I have a new virtual set of shelves, which has been filled already. So thank you very much for the support, everyone. In particular, I would like to thank Ike Morton, Richard Spivey, Emeritus, Desislav, Someone, Roller52, Someone, and Edralis. Thank you all very much for your support. And on that note, I would like to say a big thank you to everyone who has ever supported my channel. I now have this wonderful collection of virtual amphorae, which I am continually inspired by. Have you ever seen such a magnificent collection of virtual amphorae anywhere else? I think not. Now, if you would like to support my channel by adding a virtual amphora or virtual amphorae to my virtual shelves, then you can do so at the link in the description below. Okay, let's now talk about contract adjectives. As you know what contract verbs are, you may already be able to guess what contract adjectives are. Let me begin by saying that a few 2-1-2 adjectives have stems which end in epsilon or omicron, and these vowels contract with the normal 2-1-2 endings. We can call such adjectives contract adjectives. And these aren't as common as contract verbs are. I've put that there are a few of them here. There are essentially a handful of them. There are a small group of them in Greek. They're not that common, but we need to know that they exist, okay? And like I said, these have epsilon or omicron at the end of their stem, and in Attic Greek, that contracts with the usual 2-1-2 endings to produce endings which are slightly different to the normal ones. An example of a contract adjective is the adjective chrysos, meaning golden. This adjective has ous, un instead of os, on. Instead of os and on, we have ous and un. That is because, in reality, this adjective is chryseos. Chrysea and chryseon. It has this epsilon at the end of its stem. But this contracts with the usual endings to make endings that are a bit different to the normal 2-1-2 endings. In particular, eos gives us ous, ea. The reason we're adding a is because it ends in epsilon. Remember that adjectives with stems ending in epsilon, iota, or rho use alpha rather than eta in the feminine singular forms. Ea gives us eta, which is the usual feminine singular ending for a normal 2-1-2 adjective. And eon gives us un. Another example of a contract adjective is the adjective haplous, which means simple, plain, or single. This one is an omicron contract adjective. It's actually haploos. But oos contracts to give us ous, and on in the neuter contracts to give us un. Something weird happens in the feminine with contract adjectives which have stems ending in omicron. Namely, they switch to using a stem ending in epsilon in the feminine forms. So instead of haploer, what's actually here is haplea, and that contracts to give us hapler. So it ultimately gives us forms which look like the usual forms, and sa, like you would expect a 2-1-2 adjective to have, but it's a bit weird that it uses epsilon rather than omicron as its contract vowel in the feminine forms. Anyway, The good news is, ladies and gentlemen, these do not take much new learning, and I shall explain why in just a moment. But for now, please do pause the video and make sure you've got these two adjectives noted down. Okay, now that you've noted those down, I want to tell you that contract adjectives don't take much new learning, and that is because there are only a few places where they differ from normal 2-1-2 adjectives. So, as you can see, I'm now going to tell you where contract adjectives differ from normal 2-1-2 adjectives. We do not need to memorize distinct tables to learn the endings of these contract adjectives because they only differ from normal 2-1-2 adjectives in 3 places. There are just 3 places where contract adjectives look different to normal 2-1-2 adjectives. Firstly, instead of having os, they have us. Secondly, instead of having on, they have un. And thirdly, they do not have a unique masculine vocative singular form. Those are the 3 places where they differ from normal 2-1-2 adjectives. If you remember these 3 points of difference, then you'll be able to decline contract adjectives. So just note that instead of having os, they have us, instead of having on, they have un, and thirdly, they do not have a unique masculine vocative singular form. Remember that a normal 2-1-2 adjective would have epsilon in the masculine vocative singular. For example, Carlos becomes Calle in the masculine vocative singular, but to my knowledge, contract adjectives do not have a unique masculine vocative singular form. They would just use the nominative singular form, to my knowledge. Please do pause the video and note down these 3 points of difference. Now that you've noted that down, let's look at the declension of crucius so that we might see these 3 points of difference. Okay, you don't need to memorize this declension. I'm just using it to illustrate the 3 points of difference. Firstly, we said that contract adjectives have us rather than os. We see that in the masculine nominative singular form, which is crucius. Secondly, I said that they have un rather than on. We see that in the masculine accusative singular with crusun. And we also see it in the neuter nominative and accusative singular. And the third and final difference that I noted is that they don't have a unique masculine vocative singular form. We see that in the fact that I haven't included a vocative singular form here. If I ever don't include a separate vocative singular form, it's because it's identical to the nominative. Normal 2-1-2 adjectives do have a unique vocative singular form, but contract adjectives, to my knowledge, do not. They would just use the nominative singular form for the vocative singular form. So the declension of crucius here illustrates those 3 points of difference. But if you look at all of the other forms, ladies and gentlemen, they are exactly the same as those of a usual 2-1-2 adjective. There would be a difference in terms of accentuation, but we are not concerned with accents, so for us, they look exactly the same. Now, one thing that I should point out is that in the neuter nominative and accusative plural, we still have alpha, as we usually do. But this is weird because epsilon plus alpha should make eta, and omicron plus alpha, with an omicron contract adjective, should make omega. But instead we have alpha in the neuter nominative and accusative plural, as we usually do. So while this doesn't take any new learning, because it's the same ending as usual, I just wanted to point out that it is weird and an exception to the rules of contraction that we have alpha in those 2 forms. However, it's useful for us that we've got alpha in those 2 forms because it means that there are fewer differences for us to remember. As I was just saying, contract adjectives differ from normal 2-1-2 adjectives in just those 3 ways I've mentioned. So if you just remember those 3 points of difference, you'll be able to decline any contract adjective. Before we do some practice with these, let me introduce some more contract adjectives. Here are 2 more epsilon contract adjectives. Firstly, we have arguros, meaning silver, as in made of silver. There's something weird here, ladies and gentlemen. Namely, in the feminine singular forms, we have alpha rather than eta. Now, this is in reality argureos. This is an epsilon contract adjective. So, the feminine form would actually be argurea, and you might think, well, why doesn't that make argurea? Why doesn't it make a form ending in eta? That is because if the epsilon has a rho before it, then the resulting vowel is alpha rather than eta. Okay? The fact that it's got a rho before it means that we have alpha here rather than eta. But we don't actually need to remember that rule about contraction, that exception to what happens usually when you have epsilon plus alpha, because we can just remember that arguros has a stem ending in rho. The reality is more complicated than that technically. It has a stem ending in epsilon, but we can just think of it as having a stem ending in rho, and we know that adjectives which have stems ending in epsilon, iota, or rho use alpha in the feminine singular forms rather than eta. For example, the adjective makros does this. So if we remember that, then it's just as we would expect. So, like I said, if we remember those 3 points of difference and know that apart from those 3 points, all of the endings are as we would usually expect, including given that the stem finishes with rho, then we'll be fine. And the other point to note about this adjective is you may have realised that there is a pattern here in that a few contract adjectives do pertain to materials. Okay, and we also see that with the adjective kalkous, meaning bronze. We saw it with chrysos, meaning golden, and we see it with these two here as well. They used to say brazen for the adjective meaning made of bronze, but I don't think people really say brazen to mean made of bronze nowadays. Have you heard the word brazen? Do let me know in the comments below. You might have heard it with a different meaning, but it used to be able to mean made of bronze. But nowadays I think we just say bronze instead. Here are 2 more omicron contract adjectives. Firstly, we have diplous, meaning double or twofold, or of a person, double-minded or treacherous, or you could say duplicitous or two-faced. And you can see it's related to haplous. Haplous means single, diplous means double, and they do have meanings in addition to single and double, as I listed when I introduced both of them. Remember, diplous of a person can mean double-minded, treacherous, duplicitous, two-faced, etc. Secondly, we have the omicron contract adjective eunous, meaning well-disposed or friendly. This is a compound adjective, and as we might expect because of that, it is to termination, meaning that we have just one set of forms to go with masculine or feminine nouns, and a second set of forms to go with neuter nouns. There isn't a distinct set of feminine forms. We learned about to termination adjectives last time. And this is a compound of eu, meaning well, and nous, meaning mind. So, if you are eunous, you are of a good mind towards somebody. You're well disposed or friendly or kind. And I should say about the word nous, I haven't mentioned it yet, but there are some 2a nouns which contract. Nous, meaning mind, is actually noos, but it contracts with the usual 2a endings to make nous, nun, nu, etc. Anyway, please do pause the video and note down these 4 additional contract adjectives. Okay, with that said, let's do some practice with contract adjectives. Here are 4 Greek sentences for you to translate into English. Please pause the video and do that now. Okay, let's go through the answers. Number 1 is ho eiunus iatros tas gunaikas pollakis didaskei, meaning the friendly doctor often teaches the women, or the well-disposed doctor often teaches the women. We know that it means this because the friendly doctor is in the nominative singular, and the adjective eiunus, meaning friendly or well-disposed, has been sandwiched in between the definite article and the noun to apply to the doctor. We've got the sandwich construction here being used to deploy an adjective. So the friendly doctor is doing the action. Didaske is he, she, it teaches. So the friendly doctor teaches. Tas gunaikas is the women in the accusative plural. So they're the direct object. The friendly doctor teaches the women pollakis. Pollakis is an adverb meaning often. So the friendly doctor often teaches the women. Or you could say teaches the women often. You can often put the adverb in several different places in English and it still has the same meaning. Number 2 is hoistratiotai toxon chrysoun en te spelungi heuriskusin, meaning the soldiers find a golden bow in the cave. We know that it means this because the soldiers are in the nominative plural, so they're doing the action. Then we have toxon chrysoun. Toxon means bow. There's no definite article, so we would say a bow. And the adjective that's agreeing with it is chrysoun, meaning golden. And out of context, this could either be nominative or accusative singular. But since we already have a nominative, this is going to be accusative. So a golden bow is going to be the direct object. En te spelungi means in the cave. Spelunks is a 3a noun meaning cave. And heuriskusin means they find. We know who that they refers to, namely the soldiers. So this was the soldiers find a golden bow in the cave. So far, ladies and gentlemen, we've seen 2 contract adjectives being used in sentences with these unfamiliar looking endings, un and ous. So this is what you do need to be prepared to see in Greek. Even though these adjectives aren't that common, you need to be able to recognize that ous is the masculine nominative singular ending os, but it's contracted with the vowel and the stem, and that un could be the masculine accusative singular ending, or as here, the neuter accusative singular ending, or it could be the neuter nominative singular ending. There's 3 possibilities for the ending un with contract adjectives. Thirdly, we have pueisi ta kalka xipenun. This means, where are the bronze swords now? We know that it means this because pu means where in the sense of where at. AC means they are. So this means where are ta chalka xiper. We know that the adjective chalkus means bronze, and it's sandwiched in between the definite article and noun. The noun here is xipos, but here it's xiper because it's in the nominative plural. This is a 3C noun which has er in the nominative and the accusative plural. And nun means now. The reason it's in the nominative, by the way, is because the verb to be is being used. And with the verb to be, everything goes in the nominative. So this means, where are the bronze swords now, literally word for word. Fourthly, we have to pragma uk estin haplun, alla diplun. This was a bit of a weird sentence. It means the thing is not single, but rather twofold. Or you could say the matter is not single, but rather twofold, or but rather double. Or you could just say but double, or but twofold. That's because to pragma means the thing or the matter, uk means not, estin is he, she, or it is. Here the subject is to pragma, the thing or the matter. So the thing is not haplun, meaning single. Here it's neuter nominative singular. We've got un rather than the usual on because it's a contract adjective. Alla, but or but rather. Diplun means double or twofold. Okay, next I have a story for you. Okay, a short story which I've created for you to translate into English. I have underlined some unfamiliar words and glossed them in the word bank. This story uses our recent learning, including what we've learned in this lesson, about contract adjectives. So please do pause the video and translate it into English. Okay, here is one acceptable translation of this story. Alexander sells silver things in the agora, but one day a thief steals Alexander's silver things. Therefore, Alexander is depressed. But after a few days, he finds the thief. Alexander kills him and takes back his silver things. And he is friendly again. That's how you may have translated this story. If you had something very similar, then that may also be okay because there is a lot of room for variety here. There's room for variety in terms of how you translate this, but as long as it's something along these lines, you should be all right. If you have any questions about your own translation, please do post them in the comments below. To quickly run through how we know it means this, or something similar to this, in the first sentence, Alexander is the subject. The verb is porle, which means he, she, or it sells, from porleor, it's a contract verb. So Alexander sells ta argura. Here we have the definite article with an adjective, in particular a contract adjective, but we don't have any noun going with it. We don't have any noun that it's agreeing with. That's because this is a substantive or substantive adjective, an adjective that's being used on its own as a noun. Because ta is used, we understand the word things after it. So Alexander sells silver things in the agora or the marketplace. But one day, a thief steals ta tu Alexandru argura. Literally, the silver things of Alexander. We have a genitive sandwich. We're being told that they are the silver things of Alexander, or in other words, Alexander's silver things. So, but one day a thief steals Alexander's silver things. Ho un Alexandros esti dystumos. Un is a particle, meaning therefore. So therefore, Alexander is depressed. Dystumos was one of the two termination adjectives that we met last time. It literally means that you have a bad spirit, or that you're in bad spirits. Meta de oligas hemeras. Now, de is a particle meaning and or but. Here I've translated it as but. Meta plus the accusative means after. Here it's going with the accusative plural phrase oligas hemeras, meaning a few days. So we would say after a few days. Heuriske is he, she, or it finds. Τον κλέπτην. The thief in the accusative singular. So, but after a few days, he finds the thief. Ho Alexandros auton apoktene kai ta argura analambane. Now, this says Alexander, apoktene means kills, auton means him. It's a pronoun that we'll learn more about in the future, but it means him. And, we know kai is a particle meaning and. Analambane. Analambanor is a compound verb. It's ana, meaning up, and lambanor, meaning to take. So literally it says take up, but it's used to mean take back. It can mean take up, but it can also mean take back or regain. So he regains or takes back the silver things. You could put the silver things. I've said his silver things because Greek often leaves out words like his when they're clear from the context. Eunos de estin autis. De means and. Estin, he is. Eunos, well disposed or friendly. Autis means again. So, and he is friendly again. So he's gotten over his sadness over the loss of his silver things because he's found the thief, he's killed him and taken back his silver things. So everything is good again in the life of Alexander. Finally, I have exercise 3 for you here, which consists of 4 English sentences for you to translate into Greek. One thing that I should note here is that sentence number 4 has the word my in it, and now you should already know that one way of saying my in Greek is using the 212 adjective emos. However, what I haven't mentioned yet is that the noun that emos is going with must have the definite article before it. Okay, so you need to put the definite article before the word sword in Greek. And you could therefore deploy emos using either the sandwich construction or the repeated article construction. Now, with regard to these sentences, all of these use contract adjectives. Please do pause the video and have a go at translating them into Greek. Okay, number 1 is the soldier is always friendly. Here, you should have said, "O stratiotes ai estin eunuos." You should have said that because we need the soldier in the nominative because he's the subject of the verb to be. The word always is ra. If you want to say he, she, or it is, you need the word estin. That's the third person singular form of the verb to be in the present indicative. And we include a movable nu because the next word here begins with a diphthong. And that word was eunos, which means friendly or well-disposed. And it's a contract adjective, so we didn't say eunos, we said eunos. Okay, it would have originally been eunoos, but that becomes eunos. So, ous is the correct masculine nominative singular ending here. Secondly, we have the sentence, there are bronze horses in the agora. Here, you should have said, entei agorai eisi chalkoi hippoi. Now, you could have put this prepositional phrase at the end. That would have been fine. We're not too fussed about the word order. Greek word order is very flexible. So, as long as you said entei agorai for in the agora, that would be correct because en governs the dative. If you want to say there are, you need to say they are, but you need to put it at the start of the clause or sentence, or it's part of the sentence. So that's why I've put it first after the prepositional phrase, but you could have put it right at the start of the sentence and the prepositional phrase at the end. Either would be fine. I would ideally put it before chalkoi hippoi just to show its meaning there are rather than they are. So there are and chalkoi hippoi means bronze horses. Chalkos means bronze, hippos means horse. We needed it in the nominative plural because it's the subject of the verb to be. And so we would say ente agorai eisi chalkoi hippoi, or eisi chalkoi hippoi ente agorai. Thirdly, we had, where is the treacherous old man going? Here you should have put poi ho diplus geron baine. You should have said this because poi means where in the sense of where to. Then ho diplus geron means the treacherous old man or the double-minded old man. Geron is a 3A noun meaning old man, and you can apply the adjective treacherous to it by sandwiching it in between the definite article and the noun, or you could have deployed it using the repeated article construction if you wanted to. You could have said ho geron ho diplus, like that. And then the verb you need is baine, although you could have used an alternative. You could have said kore or badizde. There are quite a few verbs to go in ancient Greek. Number 4 is my sword is silver. Here you should have put to emon xipos estin argurun. We know that we should say this because we need to xipos to mean the sword. But if you want to say my sword instead, then you need to add the adjective emos, meaning my, and make it agree with the word sword. And so the neuter nominative singular form of emos, a normal 2-1-2 adjective, is emon, and xipos, although it ends in os, is a neuter noun. It's a 3C noun, and those end in os in the nominative singular, even though they're neuter. So this was one way of saying my sword. You could have alternatively used the repeated article construction. And then you needed estin to mean is, and argurun was the correct form of the word silver because we needed the neuter nominative singular form, and that ends in un rather than the usual on of a 2-1-2 adjective because this is a contract adjective. Okay, let's now summarize our learning for lesson 41. Today we've learned that some adjectives have stems which end in epsilon or omicron, and in Attic Greek, these vowels contract with the usual 2-1-2 endings to produce endings which are slightly different from the usual ones. In particular, we have us instead of os, and we have un instead of on. Moreover, contract adjectives do not have a unique masculine vocative singular form. Those are the 3 differences from normal 2-1-2 adjectives. And I've put 3 other things to note about these endings, but these are small things. As long as you remember those 3 differences I've just mentioned, then you'll be fine. But just to be clear, 3 other things to note are, firstly, contract adjectives still have the usual alpha in the neuter, nominative or accusative plural. That's strange because the ones that have stems in epsilon should have eta there, because epsilon plus alpha makes eta, and the ones that end in omicron should have omega there, because omicron plus alpha typically makes omega. Secondly, contract adjectives in omicron have the usual eta in the feminine singular forms. That's weird. And the reason for that weirdness is contract adjectives with stems in omicron switch to using a stem ending in epsilon in the feminine forms, as we saw earlier with haplus. And thirdly, contract adjectives with stems in re still have alpha in the feminine singular forms rather than the expected eta, because epsilon plus alpha should make eta. But once again, we've got the usual endings there. So these are 3 places we don't have different endings where we would expect to. Like I said, there's only 3 places where contract adjectives differ from usual 2-1-2 adjectives, namely, firstly, having us instead of os, secondly, having un instead of on, and thirdly, having no unique masculine vocative singular form. Here are the new adjectives which we have met today. All of them, apart from oligos, are contract adjectives. And one of those contract adjectives, eunus, is to termination. While we're talking about these, can you think of a word that we get from oligos, meaning few? you may have thought of the word oligarchy. An oligarchy is a society ruled by a few people, a few powerful people, whom we call oligarchs. We also met a new verb, analambanor, meaning to regain or take back, or to take up. It's a compound verb. And we also met two new adverbs, autis, meaning again, and poter, meaning one day. We have met poter once before, but I haven't listed it as a word to learn until now. Anyway, thank you very much for watching the video. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you enjoyed it. I have put a Happy New Year frog on the screen. I realise that it actually says Happy New Year's, but we're going to ignore the S. Okay, let's just pretend that S is not there. Here's an ancient Greek frog celebrating the new year, and we could caption him by saying Ho eunus batrachos den heurten anage, meaning the friendly or well-disposed frog is celebrating the festival. Anagor literally means to lead up. It's a compound verb. Agor means to lead. We know that ana as a prefix can mean up, but about a festival, a heurter, it means to celebrate. Anyway, Happy New Year, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful 2025, and I shall see you again next time.